Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Megan with your host, Megan Judge. I'm going to start the podcast out a little bit, not as light as I would like to. I'm glad that I have a clinical psychologist on today to kind of talk about what we're dealing with in LA. So here's what I'm going to say. If you are a listener and you're listening in another country, you're listening all over the United States, Canada, London, wherever you are, because I've listed that those, I'm saying specific places where I have a high listener count. Thank you, number one, for listening. But I really would like to say the following. What is happening in Los Angeles is not what they're portraying on TV. Okay. So, I'm talking about the protests and the violence and all the things that, the Trump administration has sent. The Marines have been called in. If you haven't been listening to the news, I think most people have. They've also called in the National Guard. It is not, I'm just going to say, it is not what they're portraying on TV. I've lived here over 25 years of my life. The protests and the marches are in a teeny tiny pocket in downtown LA. The violence that is going on from the protesters is very minimal. And when these bottles or whatever they're doing or the firecrackers are being thrown, this is like if there was a baseball game or some kind of game in Los Angeles. We always have these, people win tournaments like the Lakers, the Clippers, whoever's playing, or the Dodgers. And then everybody celebrates in the streets. And then at the very end, there's always these idiots that ruin the whole day because they start throwing things and burning cars. This is no different than the 25 plus years that I've lived here of marches going on. So I would like to start off by saying that. The second thing I want to say is, I am mortified by what is happening. And if you're not, I don't know why you would really be listening, and please don't take offense to that. But this is really upsetting. These are innocent, people are coming into the country illegally. Yes, there's a crisis of people coming into the country illegally. We need to find out a way to fix this. No, I don't think anybody in our country disagrees with that. But having ICE come into our country or they live here. Sorry, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm so flustered by all of this that it's hard for me to even talk about without getting heated. Women are being stripped of their babies in delivery rooms in Los Angeles hospitals. Yesterday, I go to the farmer's market every week to get these delicious muffins. Shout out Tammy's Muffins in Manhattan Beach. And she told me yesterday that her daughter's mother-in-law was almost taken by ICE. She's here legally. She's gone through the process. And just because of her brown skin and that she didn't speak perfect English, they tried to take her. And the only reason she wasn't taken is because she happened to have her papers on her. So I know that's a very long-winded intro, and I'm not Karening out. I'm not complaining. Everybody, if I write things on Instagram, if you follow me on Judging Megan, I know I've been posting about ICE all over my stories. I've lost about 1,000 followers, I think. I'm okay with that because at the end of the day, it's about right and wrong. And it's about being an American, and it's about what my country has stood for my entire life that I've been here.
We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Megan with Megan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Megan.
Poor Dr. Noelle Santarelli is probably mortified right now that I'm so heated and she's coming on. Dr. Noelle is a licensed clinical psychologist. She specializes, how perfect of a day to come on, in relational trauma. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to start right there with just my intro and your thoughts on what I said.
Sure. I mean, working with relational trauma. That's any trauma that happens at the relationship level. Typically, when you study that or talk about that, we do talk about this as occurring in childhood. Now, can we have relational traumas in adulthood? Of course, absolutely. But most of the people I work with in my private practice, their relational traumas are coming from childhood. And obviously, a huge relational trauma would be abrupt, sudden, chaotic separation from a primary caregiver or attachment figure. So we are literally watching attachment disasters unfold. So we're watching, lifelong trauma scenarios. I think every mental health therapist, advocate, psychologist, when we see this separation and the way it's going down, we know that there is a trauma response happening, and there will, 95% confidence, I'm just throwing that number out there, there's going to be a subsequent mental health situation.
There's a little boy that I just posted this on my stories the other day that's in 4th grade and was taken by ICE at his elementary school, a 4th grade 10-year-old boy taken by ICE.
No,
honestly, what is happening? And I have an 11-year-old, and I'm just thinking, I don't understand why they would do this. Like, we are Americans. We have always been a country of, I thought, kindness, and I'm devastated. And honestly, my own trauma is completely inflamed. I think anybody that has, I'm open, and we're going to talk about my diagnosis of complex PTSD, but anybody that's struggling with anxiety or depression that's watching this go down, it's like high alert, not sleeping, guilt by association. Can you touch on that? Yeah.
Helplessness, right? Helplessness, you're sort of reliving potentially a past experience where you had relational trauma, or where someone was taken from you, even if you've, traumatically lost a loved one, even to something like 9/11, a car, anyone who's lost a person who they're attached to see, to witness, to bear witness to these separations, just to if you have any amount of empathy, to put yourself in either the parent role or the child role it's just sickening. I mean, there's no other way really to put it. And I do not get political. I never get political, which some of my followers take issue with. But I don't know that this is political. I think
it's not. It's not political. Yeah. It's about right and wrong. And again, I didn't want to make that about myself, I'm struggling so much because I'm so upset. But I'm just saying, all of us as human beings, we are human beings. And the people that are hiding behind Christianity or whatever it is, we all need to use our platforms right now. If you have a platform on social media, or you or anybody, this is not political. This is, like I said, right and wrong. Take politics out of this. This is very, very wrong. And to the people that have reached out to me and said unkind things because they're being brainwashed by Fox News or whatever it is, I would like for you to understand what it's like living here. I walked the beach today. None of this it's in a teeny tiny 3-block radius. So I'm going to leave it there, because the entire podcast, I could do a 5-hour podcast about it. And I'm just asking my listeners, wherever you are in the world that are listening, I'm going to get emotional. Well, I'm sorry. I feel sorry. I feel sad that I'm an American and this is happening. And I just feel like we're messing up. That's it.
It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch and feel like there's nothing you can do either. The helplessness, I think, that a lot of us are feeling, have the urge to run in and save that little boy that you had posted, right? And just say, you're going to be okay. Your mom's going to be okay. But none of us even know that.
We're like, where are they taking them? Where are they going? We don't have answers. And that's the thing. I'm hoping that like somebody can stop this before it gets really bad.
Well,
so
and I don't want to, I guess this isn't going to be an upbeat podcast. So I'm down for that. But I also, I don't know why I'm just recently learning about this, but I also saw on social media this 11-year-old girl in Texas who had taken her own life in February. But apparently,
I saw that.
Yeah.
Because she was afraid to be taken or her parents to be taken. Was it that story?
Yeah, with some of the bullying, right? So like
the bullying. Yeah.
So okay. Interest in relational aggression and bullying and covert bullying. Now that's not covert. That's blatantly saying you're going to be left all alone without your parents because ICE is going to get you. But I mean, these are some serious consequences we're watching right now. That children, the parents, I don't like seeing adults go through trauma either, but something about seeing children being traumatized for choices they did or didn't make. I cannot handle that. Like watching everyone being hurt, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I just think we need to do better. And if you are like living in LA and you're listening, go to a march, get involved if you can. If you're spiritual like I am, go to church, say some prayers, like do whatever you can. Also, I would say have an outlet because I'm trying to not be addicted to the news, which I am. I watch it way too much and it's really bad for my brain and my own stuff that I deal with. So step away, but also like take care of yourself and this is a time in the United States where I think we all need to step it up and talk to each other and communicate and ask, really soul search, ask yourself if what's happening is okay. Okay. Next topic. Here we go. Yeah. So, I found Dr. Noelle on social media myself. And I immediately said, I need to follow this lady. Where have you been all my life? We are going to talk about relationships, specifically mean moms, specifically the way that women treat other women. Dr. Noelle knows my story because she listened to an episode that I did. I don't think you listen. I sent you an episode that I did for my listeners. I was on a podcast, I think a year and a half ago or a year ago with Nina Badzin. Her podcast is Dear Nina. Yeah. And what's the end? Dear Nina is the podcast.
Dear Nina.
Dear Nina. And it's all about relationships and friend breakups and how women treat other women. And I share my story about what happened to me with these women. So Dr. Noelle, listen to the episode and we're going to kind of talk about my own story. But first, I want to talk about you after the 25-minute intro and why you got into this.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is lighthearted in comparison, but really not. So I'm in private practice. I've always worked with relational trauma, primarily adult children or adults who as children experienced complicated relationships with their family of origin. So their moms, their dads, whoever their caregivers were, complex family systems was always my niche. In particular, working with narcissistic and borderline parents. That was always my niche, and women in particular.
Okay.
As I started, I've been doing this for, over 13 years in private practice. What I started to notice in my own life, in my own friend groups, if we want to call them friend groups, social circles, was a very similar dynamic to the same dynamic I was witnessing in dysfunctional family systems, where there was a lot of personalities, sometimes personality pathology, lots of power, lots of relational aggression or covert bullying. And this was going on among the moms, these grown women who were vying for power and control of certain social groups and social dynamics of schools, of team sports. And what I noticed was why would any other system necessarily be any other way, right? Like psychological principles are psychological principles. The same principles that were formed in families of origins and extended families were going on in these more extended social group cliques, right? So I was seeing lots of initial like love bombing, right? That same sort of narcissistic abuse cycle. Now, I'm not saying these women are all narcissists. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. But it does follow a similar pattern if you're in a pathological group. So there's the love bombing stage where you're highly welcomed. There's lots of, I love you, text me, let's go on vacation, let's do this, let's be besties, let's go shopping, let's get manis, let's get petties, whatever, right? Let's get all the kids together. There's lots of that like love bombing going on, which in parallel with narcissism, well, a narcissistic cycle, that would be the idealization phase, right? Mm-hmm. Then you start, for some reason, then you're in sort of the next phase, which is more of the sort of stabilization phase, I guess, if you will. That's where you start to just get into the relationship. It's when you start to notice maybe some passive aggressiveness, some gossip, some one-upping, some underhanded things. That's when like the real stuff starts to come out. That's where some of the power dynamics start to be at play. And then shortly, or, there's no real timeline here, but then after that would come sort of the end, the cutoff, like, okay. And then you're done. So if you don't play along right, or you don't play out that middle part just so, that's the part where most people are like, what is happening? And if you don't play it the right way, that's when the big fallout happens. So that's what I was noticing in my own life and parallel with a lot of my women clients that were coming in experiencing the same exact situation. Different schools, different communities, same story.
So this is, because I follow you. So this is and I'll give all your socials at the end, but so you listen to what happened to me. Yes. And I'm wondering, because I've always been like, I've lived with this for many years and it changed me as a person. Some for the better. I think mostly for the better. Some for the worst. I'm way angrier now. After I feel gypped and angry, and I feel like I've been had. I've dealt with what happened. This happened to me over 6 years ago. If my listeners I don't really talk about. I call them the Karens. I don't really talk about them anymore because I've really tried to not make the podcast about them. But when I saw your Instagram and when I share my story with other people, I'm like, I have to keep talking about this because it might help someone else out there that's struggling to understand why it happened. Yep. Because I still have all this stuff where I'm like, what's wrong with me? Is it because I was diagnosed with complex PTSD and I have all this childhood trauma that like this happened to me? Do I have I think I did have a bad picker in friends. And that's kind of changed me. But for you that listen to my story and for my listeners, maybe you're a new listener and you don't know, I'm just going to briefly touch on it. Okay. So I was in a friend group. You can listen to that podcast, Dear Nina. And basically in the friend group, I was kind of like, we're talking about love bombed by this friend. We met, we became best friends really quickly. I lost my very best friend in my 20s, tragically. So I was always kind of like looking for that person to substitute for what I lost. And then slowly I started to notice, just like you said, vacations, we were best friends. Our daughters were best friends. Our husbands were best friends. We're so close. And then I started to notice mean girl behavior, like leaving me out. Like I would be at a table for dinner and she would start like eye rolling if I was getting attention. I'm a lot to take. If you don't know that from listening to the podcast, I'm very loud. I'm very opinionated. I am, like I say, heavily flawed. I talk about it all the time. I'm not perfect. I can be mean. I have all of those female qualities that are bad in me. But I just noticed slowly like being stripped away. And then a new friend that like a girl in the group that was always mean, like not kind to me, kind of replaced me. And then her family replaced my family. And I was just basically dropped, but I was still being like dangled, you know, it was still like, oh, is everything okay? Like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? But I was like, then I would be ditched, or I would find out she was talking about me. It was a really horrifically bad story that ended really horribly, to the point where I was suicidal, not just because of the friend breakup, but because of all of my childhood stuff. And then I was ditched and had left with no friends, and it was COVID, and everybody decided to take this person's turn, like side in the story. And then all the women in my small town like turned on me that I thought were my friends. I couldn't even go to Target. Like I've talked about it on numerous times. So now, like years later, I still live here. They still trash me. I talk about last summer, one of them was writing all over social media, I'm a horrible person. A mom recently told me this mom was messing with her. So these women are the one that was my closest friend moved away. She does not live here anymore. But this group of women are still here, and I call them the Karens.
And to this day, you don't know what you quote unquote did, right? Or there's no like marker for.
I think that's the hardest part. I was not perfect. I've talked about this openly. When I was in that friend group, they all talked about other women. Like we'd go to dinners and it would be like, let's talk about so-and-so today. She's totally lying about her age. Let's get up, go to the bathroom. And I was mean too. And I went along with it because it's like a pack mentality. You want to fit in. You don't want to be the one that's being talked about. So I was just as unkind.
Yep.
But I will never, the kicker was, for my listeners that might be new listeners, they planned this trip. They invited all these moms that were, I thought, my friends, right? And didn't include me. And I was like, are you joking me? Like, you planned this trip with these other women? And she made it about like, oh, it's my husband's birthday. And like, or she made up some excuse. Then she writes me an email like a couple of months later being like, we live in a beautiful place, like this and that. And when I sent her an email back to be like, why did you do this? Why did you do this on this occasion? Why did you do this on this occasion? No response back. And then she got literally like 1 million people in this town to gang up on me, and like never said sorry, never apologized, made it about me. They made up lies, twisted things on me. So like to this day, all these years later, I am still hated by people. Like, I don't know why. I was never anything but nice to some of these women. I thought they were my friends. And so what I will say that I've done that's not the best thing ever is I hate them. And I'm going to say that to all my listeners. I hate these women. They are the most unkind people I've ever met. And they've done things to other women. Now I'm finding out. And so like, if I'm driving down the street, I'll give one the middle finger. Like I'll say mean things because I have not been able to get over this anger. So there you go. I know that was long-winded.
But it's a major betrayal, right? And that when you're holding on to that much pain and that much hurt from the experience, that's when it can cross. And when you were, the end result was you feeling literally suicidal, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
That's when it crosses from relational aggression into you having a relational trauma, right? So this experience was a trauma for you. The betrayal felt that bad. And
100%. I say this all the time. I've lost my sister. I lost my dad as a kid, both as a kid. I lost my best friend in my 20s. I have never dealt with something as painful as what these people did to me in my entire life. I have never dealt with this. Yep. And for any female listener out there that's dealing with mean girl stuff, was like, what is wrong with me? I shouldn't be here. Maybe they're right. There is something wrong with me. Like I'm a bad person, like all the things that went through my head. And I still deal with it. Yeah.
It's a complete mind fuck.
Yeah, it totally is.
But, there is so much going on in middle-aged women, first of all, who are moms, right? You're sort of forming your new identity or new-ish identity as both a mother and an adult human, right? You have these friendships. We're taught that friendships are the safe spaces, really, sometimes even more so than a romantic relationship. We're taught that you can share everything, that they're never going to leave you. Your besties for life, right? Like, we sort of have this expectation that friendships are going to stick around, which that's a whole nother conversation, because not all friendships are built to last. Some are for a season, some are for a reason, right? But some of us go into relationships 110%. And some of that might be based on background, how your attachment style is, what you're craving from childhood, what maybe you didn't get, what you did get. But for some people, we expect loyalty and we expect friendship and we expect that you're showing up as authentically as the other person. And when that's not met, when that's not matched, that is a huge rupture to you, not only your sense of self, but your sense of others and your sense of safety in the world. So it is extremely disruptive internally to how you're seeing the world, both yourself and others. And it really comes back to safety, your sense of safety in the world and with others. And so when there's that level of a betrayal and you don't know why, and you don't know what you did, and no one comes to you and says, hey, Megan, you said something offensive at dinner the other night. I'm feeling like I need a little space. Can we talk about it? Or, hey, Megan, I don't like how you, didn't bring me a casserole when I was sick, whatever it is, right? Like, when people aren't coming to you and giving you the chance to repair, if you have ruptured, people get in their heads about, what did I do? Is it who I am? When there's no marker of what you did, you start to think it's just who you are as a human, not something you did, which drives immense shame. And shame is a huge driver of things like suicidal ideation, right? When you think, I didn't do something bad, but I am bad. I am inherently bad. That drives a lot of mental health issues.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So this, like, my story, I think, is a little extreme, like, because you listened to the episode, but then I'm starting to learn. I mean, I've been doing this podcast almost 5 years. I've spent a lot of time talking to women that would say, oh, something similar happened to me, or this happened to me. Let me ask you this. If I could, I say this all the time, if I could go back in time, I knew, and I've thought about this. I mean, I don't even know how many countless hours I've spent wondering what I could have done differently, or why couldn't I have, that day that I met that friend, why did I have to talk to her? Why was I so taken by her? She was very charming. She was funny. She's pretty. She is had all these qualities that I've said before, reminded me of my best friend I lost, except my best friend I lost was the best person I've ever met. But I was taken, and I felt like I had to have this mom identity and friends and all this stuff. But I think back, what could I have done differently? It's kind of like I talk to a lot of abuse survivors of dealing with narcissistic relationships with men. And they're like, well, I was a target. They knew to target me. I don't deal with that, thankfully, in my marriage. And I've been married to the same person with him for almost 25 years. But why did this happen to me with the friend situation? And if for women that are listening, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I don't think there's one why. I think there's lots of whys in there, and lots of, having heard your story, lots of places I think you could have detached sooner emotionally. Okay. Right? So in listening to your story, there's lots of different spots if, let's say, we were in therapy together, right? There would have been different points where I would say, okay, we need to examine, why are you still in this? Why is it still mattering to you? When you knew they were talking badly or rolling their eyes, or why did you start working harder, which is what most women do. So I'm not saying this is just a you issue, but when we feel rejected, right, it is a biological response to try to get our belonging back. Nobody wants to be rejected. It is biologically driven in us. So shame is one of our primary emotions. It's biological. We have it at birth, right? Shame is the fear that if something is found out about you, you will be exiled by the group. That's why the action urge that we have with shame is to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you feel like, again, you didn't do something specific. If you had done something, if you wrecked someone's dinner party and then everyone stopped talking to you, you'd be like, okay, it's because I did that thing.
No, but I do talk about that. And I talked about it in the episode where I cussed out the one mom.
Before that they started.
Oh, no, that was after, like that's when everybody was like kind of looking for an excuse not to want to be my friend anymore. Because honestly, like after the friend breakup, I was probably hard to be around because I was heartbroken. And I was openly at that point for the few that stuck around. And then I started to notice like behavior with the few friends. Sorry to go off on a tangent, but the few friends that like kind of stuck around, I had like another best friend who was with me in the beginning. And I went to her house one day and I noticed all my pictures of her and I were like taken down off of a board in her kitchen. Like she was trying to find ways to get out of the friendship. And I felt it. And I was telling people like, I don't want to live. Like I told other moms this and they still, I'm like, I went on trips with you. Our kids grew up. I literally loved these people. Like I thought they were my best friends. And I'm not talking about the one that moved away, but I'm talking about like these other friends, especially one. And I felt her pulling away because I think it was so much easier just to be like, I'm done. You know, like I don't want to be in the drama. I want to go along and still be included in all the parties. And you're not anymore. Nobody wants you around.
This is part of why it's so complex is there's so many different personalities in the mix, right? It's not even just you and one other person. It's you, one other person, then another person and another person. And everyone's got their own stuff. Yeah. All bringing it to the table. So one thing is, we want to belong as humans. That's biological. It's evolutionary. We want to belong. And if we don't know why we're not belonging, we're going to fight to belong because our safety actually depends on it, or we feel like it does. If we're living in a village and you kick me out, I am going to starve. I have no way to get my resources met. So I better hope that I'm not kicked out of the group. And so we still have that evolutionary aspect within us. That's one reason. Another reason is old attachment wounds and old attachment injuries can absolutely, if you've got a bad knee and you're in rehab or you're in physical therapy, but then you go out and run a marathon, that knee might start acting up again, right? So even if you've healed earlier attachment wounds, even if you've done the work, if you're put in a situation that somehow resembles or subconsciously parallels a similar dynamic or relationship, that knee is going to start flaring up again. Right? And so it's the same thing. You wouldn't expect to not have knee pain if you've had a previous injury. If you're in a dysfunctional dynamic or a dynamic that somehow is reminiscent of an earlier dynamic, you can get an attachment injury that flares back up. And you start acting in a way that is more your regressed self, not your current day self, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another reason. So one is like the reason that we just all want to belong and not be exiled based on biology. One is if you have any early trauma, any early attachment wounds or injuries that could be sort of reopened or flared up. That's another reason it can happen if you feel like, why me? Why is it me? Another is if you've had experiences with certain relationships where you end up being a people pleaser, or you've been told you're too much, or you feel like you're not enough, those automatic thoughts are going to keep popping up. And so you're almost gaslighting yourself. You're not trusting yourself enough to say, that lady just rolled her eyes at me. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And I've been there. I've been in these groups, right? Where I look back now and I'm like, oh, Noelle, what in the world? Why would you tolerate that? Right. And, I remember being at book clubs and, me saying something about one of my kids, like some school I wanted him to go to for junior high or something. And I remember one of the moms in the middle of book club is just like, and of course I saw it. So another factor is if you're highly intuitive and empathic, you're going to pick up on these subtleties, right? And clearly I'm highly intuitive and empathic. It's my job. And so I'm going to notice nonverbal behaviors. It's not going to go over my head, right? So I noticed this. And then I, of course, because I am outspoken, I said, what was that, right? Which most people wouldn't do. I get that. I'm from New York. I speak up. And I said, what was that?
We're very similar. I think maybe that's why we get ourselves into these situations.
Most people would have quietly just let that slide. And I just wasn't going to do that. I said, what was that? Do you not think, I don't remember exactly what I said. And this whole conversation started happening in the middle of book club about how my kid is disruptive and he'd never make it into that school. And just picturing him there was like funny to them. And I'm like, oh my God, who are these ladies? Like, these are supposed to be my really good friends. And clearly there had been lots of back talk or behind the scenes talk about either my kid or my thoughts on my kid, or I don't even know what it was. But like in those situations, right? Now, the who I am today and what I know about relational aggression and how these dynamics go down, I would have said, Noelle, remove yourself from this group. Do not have this conversation. This is not worth your time. This is not worth your energy. You do not need their approval. You do not need them to approve of your child. You do not need anything from this situation. Walk away. And so sometimes I think those of us that don't easily walk away need to work on how to walk away. You don't need the approval. You don't need the acceptance. You don't need to please people. But that's hard.
Let me ask you something, because I think that's a really interesting point. So if you're somebody that comes from a background of like trauma, or you're like somebody that's like, I just need to put up with this. This is like, I'm going to make this work. I mean, I'm okay. Like, this isn't going to work. I'm going to do this instead. If you're somebody that comes from a background like that, I could see just hearing you talk why you maybe would find yourself in these situations. Because I think of like if you're of a woman and you are in a group of women friends, right? And I talk about this all the time, like, we want so desperately, we have our kids, we want this like perfect life. We want to have dinner plans. We want to get invited to all the parties. We want our husbands to be friends. We want the pictures, like the dinner pictures with the group, right? The group shots. Yeah. Cause it's like, this is I call it my Facebook life. Like, we're all such great friends, but meanwhile, we're all talking shit about each other and our kids behind each other's backs. I could see why, just hearing you say that, I'm like that too. Like, where I would be like, why are you rolling your eyes at me? But then there's the liar women that are like, see the rolling of the eyes, but they just sit there and they go, I need to keep the peace.
Yep. And so we all have our unique histories that play into how we respond and how we react. Women who have grown up or have been in situations where maybe there was a queen bee in their family. Maybe the mother was narcissistic or emotionally immature, and, you really weren't emotionally safe if you spoke up, or if that mother was disappointed in you, right? If you have a history where women or people being disappointed in you was dangerous on an emotional level, you're not going to let that happen, even if you're in a new situation in a new day, right? Until you do the work. So if you're in therapy and you're working on it, you can maybe see some of those parallels, or why it feels like such a visceral response to like, I need to call that out, or like, I need to know, or like, why don't they like me? Or what can I do differently? You can get back in an older, more regressed space. If you're coming from a place of, your wise self or your more sort of evolved self, that's the me that would have sat back. And this is just one situation, but would have sat back and said, okay, and I'm done with this. Like, I won't be coming back. No need to waste my energy saying something, convincing people, proving anything. I would have sort of noted and emotionally detached.
What do you say to people that like, okay, so I'm just going to use my own story again, but like I learned from my situation. So that's why in the beginning I said the good, there's so much good that came out of it, which is now like I have a better picker. Like if I feel like even the slightest, like I don't trust you, you're up to something, I now like walk away. And I've actually kind of recently had to do that, is just be like, I'm kind of like taking a break from a friendship. And like you said in the beginning, like it's not a TV show. Like you didn't say this, but I'm saying like kind of what you said. There's a season and a reason for friendship. So it's okay to be like, I'm friends with you, but like maybe we need to go in different directions and maybe we're not supposed to. If like I could have gone backwards to the main queen bee, let's call her the queen bee in the friendship because she was in the group too. I wish I would have just been like, you know what? Like, you're not treating me very kindly. Like, let's just take a break. Like, yeah. I don't think we're kind of supposed to be friends. And I wish I would have done that. And and today for my listeners, I would do that because they just did it recently. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's exactly sort of the place that I wish and I hope and I like to teach women that they can get to. So everyone always wants to know, what do I do about this? How do I fix it? That's what most people who come to me ask, right? And looking back to my own experience, right? I did want to fix it, whatever it was, right? I wanted the group to go back to homeostasis or to go back to where I felt accepted and I was part of the in group, not part of the person who was being talked about. There was always someone, right, who was being talked about. Yeah. And it just happened to be, I was it. And when I was it, I called it out, which is not what you're supposed to do in that group dynamic, right? That's not going to keep homeostasis. But I want women to know when you find yourself in those situations, it's not always about fixing it. Sometimes it is about fixing it for yourself. And sometimes that does mean leaving it. A lot of us, and women, again, this goes back to sort of how we are as relational creatures, women in general. For the most part, we want to get along. We really want sameness and equality among each other. That is really what we want. And if you think back to even, when you were a kid playing, right? If you were having like a pretend birthday party or something, you'd be like, okay, everybody gets one. And you really want to make sure everything's even and fair. And you want to make sure it's like level playing field. So we really do want that inherently. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's too complicated and too messy. We can't fix it. Sometimes we have to lean into accepting the reality that is, and we may not have answers, right? We may not know why someone's rolling their eyes or doesn't like your kid or doesn't like your husband or who the hell knows, right? We don't always know. Sometimes we have to trust ourselves and trust the experience that we're feeling, that it's not fixable, not always, and it may not be worth fixing. And that might be okay. So I
wonder too, sorry to talk over you, if it's kind of like the weirdest learning experience. I say in life, like you go through these series of lessons. I mean, I wish I was like out of it and I didn't have to see these women anymore. But sadly, like I'm in a 2-mile radius. I have kids in the same school or one kid and, I have to. So but like going backwards, there's things I could have done differently. So for my listeners, if you're in like this kind of situation where you're in like a friend, like love bombing, or you're in this like group, let me just tell you, like the group shot pictures and all that stuff sounds great, but it's really like not what really matters. Like, and I'm saying this as I've gotten older because it's been years. I mean, the initial friendship happened like over a decade ago. Now what really matters to me is like keeping it very small. I have a very small, tight, like very small group of friends. And that's by choice. Cause I am cool in my own, like I'm joking around, but like, I could probably have more friends, but I don't want to spend my time with anybody except my family is my priority now. Whereas before, it was like I always had plans on a Thursday night and I had always had things like dinners and parties on the weekends. I don't do that really anymore, also because I enjoy being in bed by 9.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I just kind of wanted to add that too. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And I think sometimes when you get into these, and there's a big difference between a friend group and a clique.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So a friend group, so sometimes I will have people reach out to me and say, well, I love my friend group. And you should. I have no problem with having a large friend group. That's very different than a clique. A clique is a closed system. A friend group is an open system. So a friend group where, if I said, hey, can I bring Megan to book club? Or I got this new friend. Can she come? A friend group would say, yeah, bring her. Come on.
Yeah.
A clique, there would be some backlash potentially because it's a closed system. So I am not anti-friend groups as long as it's an open system where people can be and do and expand and retreat as they feel they need, right? There's seasons of expansion. There's seasons of contracting. A friend group allows for that movement. If you think back to like your lifelong friends, right? They allow for different movements in your life as you grow, right? You're not always the same person. Cliques don't. You're in a closed system. So I think it's important to recognize, is this a friend group or is this a clique?
I was in a clique. As you say that, I'm like 100%. Yeah.
If you're in a clique,
and yeah,
that might be a warning sign in and of itself. I'm not saying all cliques are bad, but it is a closed system, which means there's not space for you to grow, change, or there's no real flexibility. There's rigidity in how it's structured and how it operates. And you will be okay without the clique. There's this false sense of safety sometimes and protection with this group, this cohesive group, or this unit that you move with, that you have plans with on Thursday, and you've got something on Saturday, and you're not going to be alone on Tuesday. But, and I say this often, approval or it's not protection. They might approve of you today. You might feel like you're getting approval, but you've got to keep that up. If you've got to keep up the performance, if you've got to keep it up, if you feel like you have to keep it up, that's not protection. That's not going to keep you safe. And you can experiment with letting that go.
I think what you just said to me is like earth shattering because it's so true. No, seriously. And I hope my listeners catch that too. I say this all the time. When I was in that group, we would go to a dinner. I would go to bed at night. I put my head on my pillow and I'm somebody that is spiritual. And I would be like, God, I really messed up today. I was not nice. I did not say nice things about people. And I went along with things, or I wrote something mean about somebody else. I knew I was in it, and I'm guilty of it. P.S. also. Yeah, I mean, we're women. So I say this too. Women can be so awesome. We are creatures that like talk about things, and we talk about like our husbands driving us crazy. Sorry, Ron. And we talk about like our kids and what, like we're struggling as mothers. Like I was struggling today, like nobody's business. And it's summer and they're home and like, it's almost only like day 2. And I'm already like, when are you going back? And I think that women support each other in such like wonderful ways. But then there's like the other side of it where it's like this catty, and not all, but we all have the capability of being catty. I do. I can be mean. I can be jealous. I've always wondered where this comes from my whole life. Like, is it men? Is it the way we're taught as young girls? I don't know. You're the doctor.
Right.
But do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And some people have it more than others, that urge to compete or jealousy. And, also if we look at, so if you're in a clique, first of all, notice if you're in a clique. If it feels like a closed system, ask yourself, does that fit with who I am as a person? Or is it just sort of giving me the illusion of safety and protection that I might be craving? And how else could I get that need met of protection or safety or cohesiveness without being in a closed system that doesn't necessarily bring out the best in me? If you start noticing that you're anxious about what you're wearing to dinner, or where you're going to sit at dinner, or where you last on the text chain, And you don't usually, now, if you have social anxiety and that's been your pattern your whole life in all your groups, that's a different story. But if you notice something about yourself that is atypical, I've never in my life gone home and been like, that wasn't my best work. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
That's just not how, and some people do, but I don't. And so in this group, when I started to be like, was that my best work? I don't think I should have said that. Or like, was that weird? That should have been a sign that there was something.
I went through the same thing. Oh my God. Yes.
Right?
Oh my God. Yes. 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 Yes.
Fine. That something was not right for me. Or right. So look at your anxiety. Are you more anxious than normal? Do you feel like you have to filter yourself in an unusual way? Do you feel like you wouldn't be able to bring a best friend from home around these people? Would you be embarrassed to be like, these are my new friends? Would they be like, what? So you've got to sort of make an assessment of your situation before you let yourself get so emotionally sucked into it that you're operating from your emotional mind rather than your wise mind. So
let me ask you one more thing, because you just brought up the friends from home, okay? Or like a best friend. Because I grew up in DC, like I talked about Potomac, we talked offline, and I'm still like best friends with my childhood friends. I was like I went to all girls boarding school. I went through like drama in college with friends, like where we would like hate each other and not speak, or a roommate or something. But like, I'm still best friends with like almost all my childhood friends, and so like, I think that's also why I was like dependent, because my family life was so messed up. I was like in an abuse. My stepfather was abusive. My dad died, like all kinds of things that my friends were like my world. And I depended on friendships. So then when this happened, it was like, what is my identity? Like, I am a social person. I don't know how to be me anymore.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You start to lose yourself in these systems that are not healthy. They're dysfunctional. There's relational aggression. If you are consistently asking yourself in one particular group, is it me? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
My guess it's not you. It's the wrong group for you.
But also I was going to say the one friend that doesn't live here anymore, I like not going to give her a name, but she was mean to one of my best friends from growing up when she came to visit. Like, there's so many things that I look back on and I'm like, why didn't you listen to your gut? Like, or if my mom came into town, I would be so excited. Like, I want you to meet this person. And my mom, like, I just was so used to like growing up, like, it was like my friends were my family. Yeah. So I would be like, hey, like, let's go out with our moms. Like, I just wasn't used to any of this.
In motherhood, we are in this new phase of life, especially as new moms, right? Or when your kids are younger. You're desperate for connection and belonging, and it's your first time doing something. You want others that are in a similar boat, and so we are even that more vulnerable in that stage of our life.
Yeah,
saying like, welcome me, include me, want me, let me know that I'm doing okay, that my kids are doing okay. We're desperate for that, so it really sort of. You're in a more vulnerable position. And I can look back on myself as a younger parent and think, wow, I was really vulnerable. If my childhood friends or my college friends lived near me, I don't know that I would have gotten into one of these cliques, right?
Me too.
The belonging and the connection that I was craving. I would have had it.
I wonder too, like, I feel like I'm being such a loudmouth this episode. I should pay you for your time. But I'm wondering too, this is just me thinking out loud. The good parts of this, listeners also listen to me when I say this. From what I went through, I've made some like one of my best friends that I've made. I talk to her every morning and my husband's like, why are you talking to her again? But like, if we get into it, cause we talk every morning for an hour, I'm like, we have like a recap hour, and she's like a local mom here. Cause I really honestly didn't think I would ever make friends again. My heart was broken, shattered. I had no friends, like none in this town. All my friends in like West Hollywood are gay men. So it was like, I couldn't be like, come out, you know, I have friends in LA, but I had to completely start over, completely. And this one friend and I, like, sometimes we get into it and we don't agree, you know, like we kind of got into it about something recently and we didn't agree. And we didn't, you know, I was like, I have to go, which is like my protective mechanism because she said something I didn't like and I hung up. And then like, she was like, texted me back and she's like, said something like, we really need to talk about this or this, I meant this for this, this, and this. And in my head, I went to this place of, they're all going to walk away again. She's going to say something and I'm not going to have any friends again. And the whole town's going to turn on me. And I'm like this horrible person. And like, I get emotional even thinking about it.
Oh, that's the trauma piece.
It's the trauma piece. And then I picked up a phone because I started going, I have to fix this. And she was like, she said something that like really touched me. And she was like, Megan, like we can always, sorry, I'm such a crybaby. Every podcast I cry all the time. But she said, we can always talk about things. Like just because we don't agree doesn't mean we're not going to be friends again. Because she knows like what I went through, you know, or if she had to do something with like one of the mom's kids and, you know, I went, oh, are they going to say something about me? And you're not going to be my friend anymore. I didn't say that to her, but in my head, I'm like, oh no, they're all leaving me again. No, like not, I mean, it's okay for them to have their own lives or kids to have their own lives. Like these are real friends.
Real friends. Yep.
So if you're listening, listeners, and you went through this, all it takes is like, if you have 3 friends, they say that like, if you can count your friends on your hands, you're lucky, you know? Cause I know like that friend of mine is a genuine, real friend. Right?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, just taking some time also to be mindful. I think when we are, again, not just new moms, but this can be women in workplaces. This can, you know, my experience was with this as a mom, seeing it for the first time. But slow down, like don't necessarily go so fast.
Yes.
Talk about not leaving relationships in an emotional space, right? Not saying like, I'm upset, I'm angry, so I'm leaving this relationship. I think we have to put just as much care into how you enter a relationship, right? So I always ask my clients, like, are you entering this relationship in emotion mind or are you in wise mind? So you want to be just as careful when you give yourself in a relationship or enter into a relationship as you are when you leave a relationship. You want to be just as careful with both.
Because you can be in a trauma bond. I think we said this in the beginning, or like a narcissistic cycle with a friend.
Yes.
You know, which I didn't realize in the beginning.
Yes,
you know, that person is, you know, not everybody's like a demon in this story. I think some of the women just like went along as a protective mechanism because they didn't want to go there. They knew what I was going to end up going through.
Yeah.
But I think that there's just red flags that you have to, listeners, if you're in a friend group and you have these red flags, please take it from me, like listen to them because I did not and I regret it.
Oh, and one last thing I'll say, don't feel like you have to stay for your children.
Yes, thank you.
So a lot of women stay and they know it's the wrong fit and they know it's the wrong group and they know it doesn't bring out the best in them, but they're so afraid of what will happen to their children's relationships if they leave. And I can promise you, your children need you more healthy emotionally than they need those specific friends in that friend group.
But that's a good point. So what do you do in that situation? In my case, my daughter was best friends with the girl's daughter. And then the mother was telling her daughter, oh, I keep trying to call her and she's avoiding my phone calls. So she made me out to be like, cause my daughter was like, would see her at school and be like, why aren't you talking to me anymore? Or why aren't we doing anything? What would you do in that situation? What would you tell people to do?
So it's complicated because it depends a lot on age too. So I have a guide coming out soon, finally, where I break it down into developmental ages and stages of how to have that conversation with your child. So the conversation you're going to have with an 8-year-old about this type of dynamic might be different than the one you're going to have with like a 14-year-old.
Okay.
So it really depends on the age of the child, but you do want to have the conversation, but the amount of information you're going to share is going to depend on their age. And you're really going to model healthy boundary setting. And you're going to model that you don't sacrifice yourself for a relationship.
So is it healthy and I'm taking myself out of the equation and thinking if it was someone else, if it were two moms and they were friends and they had a friend break up and their daughters were best friends, say they're like 9, 10, would you tell them the girls can still be friends at school or whatever, but we can't play outside of school? Is that like a healthy thing to say?
And again,
what would you say?
I would say it depends on how toxic and how tense the parents' breakup was, the friend breakup was, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can be cordial and just emotionally detach, I would allow the daughters to still connect on their own terms outside of school, even if you can remove yourself from the relationship. If both parents can be emotionally mature enough to stay out of that relationship and just be the transportation. I wouldn't necessarily make my child sacrifice that friendship if they're not continuing a toxic cycle, right? So if your child's going to that friend's house and the mom is talking badly about you, your kid can't keep going.
Yeah.
But if the mom is also healthy and mature enough to say, I don't want them to lose their friendship, then I think it's fine.
Well, I think it also depends on the level of like who the person is and what happened. So that makes sense. I keep saying my last question, I think, but because I could make this an 8-hour long podcast. So say that you have all this anger. Let's just say you're me. And I feel like it's a healing journey and it's taken years and I'm still on it. So for example, I saw one of the one I call the Queen of all Karens, who is not like, she's just like this woman and she's done horrible things to like multiple people in my community and just keeps going. And she's clearly a very unhappy person. And the other day I saw her and every time I drive by her, I give her the middle finger because she's part of the reason everyone trashed me. She made up stuff about me that wasn't true. What do you say to me to like get me to stop this behavior? Because what am I doing? I mean, I'm also like perimenopausal and dealing with all the hormones, which we didn't talk about. Sure. So on top of everything else, I'm also dealing with hormonal issues.
Right. So there's two ways to look at this.
Okay.
One way I could frame it for you, but I'm not going to, is we could call what you're doing alternate rebellion. So in a type of therapy that I practice, there's a skill. So we could say you're using a skill. I don't think you actually are, but we could pretend that you are. But alternate rebellion is when you do something that feels like rebellious, but is less dangerous than what you actually want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so driving past someone, let's say you're so angry, you want to, get out and beat them up. It's alternate rebellion to say, I'm just going to flip you the bird instead. Right. Or we've got people that want to they're so angry, they want to destroy their living room. Well, alternate rebellion might be going in their shower and smashing eggs.
Okay. So here's the good news, listeners. I would never do any of that. So that's good. But I feel like the bird or like anything like that is healthy for the amount of like, am I wrong?
No,
Probably not. You're looking at me like, no.
So we could say you're using alternate rebellion, but
which is not good.
Alternate rebellion's okay in a certain time and a place. If you're ready to sort of move beyond that and reduce the anger, if you're ready to reduce the anger, I would say we have to do opposite action for anger.
And what is that?
It's not fun, but opposite action for anger. So anytime you have an emotion and you lean into that emotion further, you're going to continue to build the emotion bigger. You're not actually making it smaller. So if I'm sad and I get in the car and I, blast the saddest music I have, I'm going to start crying and continue crying. That's good to an extent. If it starts to get too intense or reduce my effectiveness, then I want to do the opposite. I want to turn the dial down. So opposite action for anger would be to gently avoid or ignore and potentially do something a little bit kind.
Oh, no, I'm not there, Noelle. That's not happening. No, I mean, again, I'm very heavily flawed, like I said, but I have had the ability to ignore. So some of them.
Gently avoid and ignore would be the first. Now, let's say you're angry at your husband, right? This might be a better example, right?
Yeah.
You go to bed angry and it's the morning and, you don't want to talk to him, but maybe what you do is you don't talk, but you say, would you like a cup of coffee? Not in a sarcastic way, in a nice, could I make you a cup of coffee? That's an example.
So are you trying to say that I need to speak to them? And again, Absolutely I'm putting not. Myself.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So is ignoring okay? Because you're right. What you're saying is complete for listeners too, that might be relating to this. So in the moment, the bird, it seems like the healthiest, happiest thing. Or if I maybe rolled down the window a teeny bit and said something not so nice, that also felt healthy and good in the moment. And then afterwards I was like, or I told my husband, he was like, maybe not the best idea. I was like, maybe you're right.
So what it might look like for you is you drive past or you don't drive past because you're going to gently avoid or ignore.
Well, I can't. Sometimes I just they live in my neighborhood. I can't help it. Yeah.
You drive past and you smile gently and you say, may you get what you need. And you keep
or could I say blessed day?
Exactly.
Like Handmaid's Tale. Blessed day. I might just start saying that.
Blessed day.
I feel like we're making progress right now.
And you do a half smile. It's called the half smile. Don't show teeth. You have to do a half smile because it triggers your brain that you're neutral. So it's going to help you shift out of that anger.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to try and work on this.
Lisa, you got to look creepy.
Yeah.
And you say, have a blessed day.
And if they're listening, because they love to have their little spies, just get ready for the blessed day because it's coming. Again, I could talk to you for hours. So say somebody wants to find you and they're dealing with this kind of relational trauma or mean girl stuff. Where do they find you?
So the only place they can find me right now is Instagram or Facebook. Or TikTok. It's all the same, but it's dr.noelle, Noelle .Santarelli. I am in the process of making a website. I've always only gone by word of mouth in Atlanta because I went to grad school here and I've always had a full practice.
I have a good website guy, by the way. I love my shout out, Matt. Yeah.
Despise websites, which is why I started my Instagram in the first place.
Yeah. I hear you.
I try to get back to most of my DMs. I cannot answer a big, because of my license, I can't give advice on there. I have this Mean Girl Mom Survival Guide coming out in the next week, which is 70 pages full of why this happens, scripts to use, red flags to look for that you can buy on my Instagram.
Okay, let me just ask you this. I keep saying my last question. And if you're listening, I'm sorry. I know I was all over the place this episode, but if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this subject. How many women do you think deal, and say out of 1 out of 5, what is the statistic of women that deal with this?
So I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I started my Instagram account November 2023. I posted about this, adult mean girls, in April 2024. I now have 45,000 followers. And this is what I talk about.
Oh my God. That says something. How many people, do people message you all day long? I
cannot keep up. And this is all I talk about, right? So I'm not even really talking about the stuff I really work on. And I'm not talking about narcissistic parents or, early childhood trauma. No, this is all about adult mean girls.
So if you're listening, listeners, you're not alone. You can always reach out to me. There are new friends. There are, I say this all the time, in my darkest times, which was 2020, where I literally did not want to go on. And I was I felt like I was wearing this scarlet letter and nobody would talk to me. And I was kicked out of my group, basically was no longer included in parties. People still talk about me, but they can talk about me all day long because guess what? Doing okay.
Well, and that's all the women on my page. So if you're feeling this, go to my page. I've got all my podcast guest episodes saved in my highlights. I have examples of relational aggression saved so you can read them. See you're not alone. And some of the women in my community are lovely. They will say, if you need a friend, I'm here. This happened to me. Like, it is really, really, I think it's been really healing for a lot of women.
I'm so there's so many horrible things about social media, but there's so many great things like the connection. And honestly, if it wasn't for social media, I never would have found you and you wouldn't be on today. Exactly. So let's give a shout out to the good things about social media. Yep. And as women, if you're listening, keep lifting each other up. And, there's other friends out there. If you've gone through something like that, you're going to be okay. I'm okay right now. Am I 100%? No. But I would say I'm 90, maybe 85. So that's progress, right?
And now you're going to say, have a blessed day. So you'll be even better.
With a half smile and a smirk.
Creepy smile.
Blessed day. Have a blessed day. Dr. Noelle, it was such a joy meeting you and having you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Everyone, keep going. You matter. Your story matters.
Judging Megan with Megan Judge.